When I built this workshop, it was close to this tree. Very close. So after a windy, stormy night 15 months ago, it fell down. So I asked the tree surgeons to cut me a few cookies.
And this is what I'm left with.
Now, my wife used to work in countryside management, and on 2 separate occasions, 2 different people came to the house and noted that this was a lime tree. The tree surgeon who come out said it was willow, but then he described willow as a softwood, which you can see it's not. So I'm leaning towards the opinion of the park ranger with 40 years experience and say it's a lime tree, but if anyone thinks differently, let me know. Now, this tree was apparently diseased, and that weakness had caused it to blow down in the storm. Luckily it was covered by the insurance because it hit the cabin by my workshop, and getting it out of the way for nothing was a bit of a stroke of luck. And that was 15 months ago, and I decided to sort through the slices to find a suitable piece that I hoped would make a nice little side table. Needless to say, that didn't go to plan, as you'll see later as the video progresses. But I separated them and covered them, but as you can see, they'd become a haven for woodlouse, so they hadn't stayed as dried as I'd hoped. And in hindsight, maybe I didn't leave enough airflow. This whole area will be transformed soon with outdoor wood storage and decking, and that is something I'm desperate to do. So I'll roll the original piece I'd intended to use out the way and turn my attention to this other pile. Notice how I kiss the bicep, and then use a scrap of wood to scrape away the insects. Very manly. I like the look of this piece of tree, so that's the one I go with.
Right, I thought that'd been better nicked than that. That damp's got in, maybe I didn't air them enough, the sticks in between weren't big enough. It's been pretty damp. So, I think I'm going to set something up outside, because I don't fancy removing the bark and all that in here. I don't know what's going to come running out of it, and I'm a bit scared. Let's see how we go.
I'll reiterate, that's a joke. I'm not worried about what's going to come out of it. It's more the mess that getting that bark off is going to cause in my workshop. So I'll set about it with a bolster chisel and start to remove the loose bark around the edge. Also give it a wipe with a wire brush just to get a look at the grain and remove any surface dust. This is my first time doing anything of this nature, so it was gratifying, satisfying and really interesting. You know what you're getting with a 3x2 CLS length of timber, but this was a mystery to me waiting to be unravelled. And the bark came away fairly easily with the chisel. And just to clean it up further, I chopped up the wire wheel brush on the drill and give it a good clean up, removing all that surface bark. This bit I found strangely therapeutic. My other job is so mind-numbingly boring, not for long I hope, but more on that later, but it's so mind-numbingly boring that getting the chance to do things like this on days when I'm not doing that job are an absolute godsend. I mean, call me crazy, but this is fun. You see, I'm looking at this former branch sticking out and I decide I don't really like it, so I decide to remove it with my circular saw. However, the blade won't go all the way through, so I end up finishing it up with my old handsaw. Who needs a gym membership? Now, even though this will be flattened shortly, I decide to get the sanding flap wheel on it just to get a good look at the surface. Call it curiosity, call it impatience. And doing this, I can already see a lot of spalting. And that was about it for the outdoor work, and I could finally get it into the workshop. I set the cookie slice on the workbench to figure out the size of the router sled I would need to build. Now, there's 1001 YouTube router sled builds out there, I've counted, and they're far more advanced than this, so I won't go into depth. Suffice to say, there's a few things I would do differently. Firstly, I tried to make this future-proof for bigger projects, but in hindsight I would have kept it smaller and bespoke for these cookies. The base of the sled was 18mm ply, which was good for stability, but it doesn't leave much wiggle room when plunging my bit. So I'd probably use angle iron in the future. And finally, the rails I would make so they adjust, as the further I got down this cookie, there just wasn't enough reach with the bit, so I ended up having to cut bits off the rails as I went. The flattening bit that I got from Rutland's though was excellent. Now, my workbench isn't flat, so I used glazing packers to achieve a flat base with this ply before securing it to the workbench with some screws. And in the words of Adamant, I put some wax on the tracks and allow for a smoother ride, although it doesn't really matter because I ended up having to increase the height of the rails initially. The cookie isn't flat on the base, so I use further packers just to give it some stability. Here I notice the sled won't clear the cookie, so I cut a couple of strips and add these to the rails to get the initial high points off, and then I can remove them and set about flattening the whole of the cookie. This slice had a big dip, so the first few passes really only removed that one top left hand corner as we're looking at it. But here you'll start to see some of that beautiful spalting. And there's not much to this other than going back and forth, lowering the bit, back and forth, lowering the bit, back and forth, lowering the bit, and so on. And it worked really well. Which I was surprised, I don't know why, because it should work well, but it was just really good. But don't half make a mess of your workshop. And when the one side was flat, I vacuumed and flipped it over and worked on the other side. And I've got to say, this 15-year-old works router didn't fail me. It's incredibly reliable. It was round about this stage I started to think, I'm not going to be able to use this today. But I decided to sand it just to see what it looked like. And you'll see that there's a dark half and a light half, but it's really weird. The light half was dry yet soft, but the dark half was damp yet solid. You'll see here the light half, this is bone dry. Well, not bone dry, but fairly dry, and look how soft it is. Put my thumb right in there. I mixed some epoxy with some black dye and sealed the inside of the hole, which I'll deep fill at a later date. And then I'll store it under my workbench for who knows how long.
So that's probably it for this video. I've built a router sled. I've had my first experience of flattening a cookie slice out of a trunk. I've just been vacuuming. Honestly, I need some kind of shroud because it just gets everywhere. It's ridiculous. I've had to take all my my stuff. I'm just covered. But it does work. That bit was fantastic. That really worked. But now, those moisture readings were about, what were they? Somewhere in the 50s. I don't know whether this is even usable in the future, but I'm going to leave it under there and forget about it. And if I ever do a part 2, I will film it. So to start with, it was 17, was it? And now it's 12, 5 inches. So I've removed 5 centimetres from its high spot. So, thanks for watching. I hope you've learned a few things, even if it's what not to do. And I will catch you next week.